This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
Billy.
I thought we'd been recording this whole time, actually.
No, I would never
I would never do that.
I would never trick you like that. Excited to have you. I get to do a deep dive on people every time I do one of these interviews. So I've just been staring at your mug for decades. I've already been staring at your mug for decades, but to get to go back in and play and then kind of see you differently.
You had to stare at it every day on set.
I know. But did you have this mustache? You didn't have a mustache in Morning Rock, do you?
Oh, this is
it's just this for Fire Country. This is the stash.
The Fire Country mustache.
You can only do, but can we talk about the beginning of your career also? Like the bad guy with facial hair? I feel like that was like.
I like to call him bad boyfriend with the gun. But
bad boyfriend with the gun. No typecast at all here. Not at all.
That's what it seemed like. I mean, you get a lot of, when you first come to town, you get a lot of TV guest star stuff. And that's just what it seemed to be and I probably only did, realistically, I probably only did 3 or 4 of them or something like that. But yeah, I thought at that point, I was like, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my.
Yeah, like facial hair auditioning is where it's at for you. It's morphed and changed. Okay,
if I didn't have the ability to grow this facial hair, I wouldn't work at all. Yeah.
Well, there we go. And now interview is over. So your best tip for auditions is facial hair. Obviously, it's not going to help me, but maybe it can really help.
I'm sure we'll circle back to that at some point in time during some specifics in this interview.
Okay, we have to start in the beginning because I know that the dream was music. Yes.
That's not necessarily all the way true. I kind of envisioned a dual career the entire time.
You did?
I did. I mean, my mother still has a journal that I wrote in 3rd grade saying something about my ambitions about being a movie star because I wanted to pay all my mom's bills. So,
but no music in there. You just wanted to be a movie star.
There's no music in there yet. The music came along when I was like, sort of preteen and stuff like that, just playing around with it. And then in high school, I put a band together and I thought that was, I thought,
you're on your way.
There's something happening here. And then after high school, I put a real band together and I thought something was happening there. And it kind of was for a while. And then we were coming up during the grunge era in Seattle. I was living downtown Seattle. And, that movement was really apparent everywhere.
That was the vibe.
We weren't playing anything like that. I was doing, whatever my version of sort of art rock was. and
are you going to university at the same time? Because then you go to Western Washington. Did you go to there?
Did not go to Western. That got somehow put into a bio someplace.
Yes.
The closest I ever got, my high school was like across the street from Western. And I had a friend whose dad taught there. And so I think at one point I might have just lied on one of my resumes and said, yeah, I took some classes at Western with this dude, but I didn't.
Well, we all need that one resume, right? Because it's music that brought you to LA, right? So then I want to know kind of that first audition. How do you start landing auditions? Is it because the band kind of goes away, or the band's going and somebody comes in and is like, hey, because how are you going to get that movie star ranking and pay mama's bills?
Yeah. So the brief version is this. I made a couple of moves to LA, but so during the uprising of the grunge movement and I sort of recognized like, this isn't going to happen for me in this way. And I had a manager at the time, music manager, who got my tape to somebody down in LA. And I ended up getting a solo demo deal. So I go down to LA and they hook me up with, very famous producer. I mean, I was in over my head already, very famous producer named Phil Ramone, who did all the Billy Joel albums and all like. And I was like, "You're hooking me up with this guy?" So they fly me out to his ranch in New York, someplace in upstate New York. We record 3 songs. I remember very well, like when we got done with the recording process, I was like, "This is awesome. I can't believe it. I hate these recordings. I don't like this," and so
because it wasn't your vibe at all.
It was. I was like, "This is not really what I want to do." Anyway, so they turned that in. At that
point, do you get to bow out, or are they like, "Okay, thank you so much. This is obviously not working"?
I didn't have to bow out. They bowed out I mean, at that time, Benny Medina was running Warner Brothers Records, and I think all that I remember is I think Phil kept going back to him saying, like, "What do you think? And what do you think?" And I remember hearing something like, "Well, if you're going to keep bugging me, the answer is no." So, which was,
perfect Billy answer.
Probably that blessing in disguise. But so after that happened, I was in town already, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can find a way to, put myself out there and read for everything that I possibly can. I don't know how I do that. Get a call from a very old friend of mine back in Seattle. And she says, "I know this casting director down there, and she's doing this movie." And and I told her she's got to see you for it. I said, "Oh, fuck. Yeah, thank you. That's great." Go in. I do that little tiny, like really quick audition. Didn't get that gig because it ended up going to, a bigger name.
Yeah.
But they gave me a
name. I love when they say that to you at the beginning of your career. You're like, "I have a name, not my name." Oh, okay, right. Great.
And then they tell you what the name is, and I'm like, "Who's that?"
Yeah, exactly.
So they threw me a little role in that. Anyway, that casting director, bless her heart, she called up all the agents that she knew, and she said, "Go meet this guy, meet this guy, meet this guy." So I went and had.
Wait, because they gave you a little part in the movie. You didn't get that part, but you got a different part.
Yeah, but the casting director herself, she was sort of she just kind of championed me at that moment. She just said, I think,
Do you think that was just beginner's luck? Did you know what you were doing in the audition? That's what I'm curious. When people come to town and they kind of score on that first audition.
Yeah, did I know what I was doing? I had already done, when I was in Seattle doing my music stuff, I had done 2 little indie films up there.
That's what I was wondering.
Little indie films. And, they were, decent roles in the indie films, but, I was still sort of guessing at it, I suppose. But I knew at that point in time, I kind of knew what I did well. I knew what I could get away with. I knew what was out of my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. I wasn't what you would call, a daring actor. I was like, I'm going to stay in this fucking lane for a little bit and see, see if it serves me.
Stay in the pocket till you're done playing all those roles and get that name.
Well, yeah, some kind of anything, anything where they kind of go like, "Oh yeah, I know who that guy is." Just by, the casting directors and stuff like that.
Yes.
And so the build was, as it usually is, it was kind of sporadic. You get a gig here, and then I think I did a Budweiser ad with Fincher directed this Budweiser ad, and that paid my rent for the year.
When commercials still ran. Yes.
When commercials were still doing that thing. Yeah.
And wait, when she set you up with all these meetings, did you get an agent out of that situation?
I did. Great. I did. Signed with my first agent pretty much right away. And I don't remember major gaps at the beginning between when I would, get a gig and wouldn't. But I do remember a couple of years later on the major gaps. You know what I mean?
That's what I was curious about, because there's a couple at the beginning that I was wondering, once you got Mafia, were you kind of off to the races, or once did Dill either one? I thought so, right? right? I would
Yeah,
assume.
Mafia was that was my first studio picture. And when studio pictures still kind of meant a thing, that was when, that was a Touchstone picture, and Touchstone was like a big deal, like an offshoot of Disney, right? It's Lloyd Bridges, it's Christina Applegate, it's Jay Moore. And somehow I got this gig. I went in to read, and again, just totally guessing, and they're all sitting there going like, they're and then talking amongst themselves and somebody said like, it might have been like Jay Moore or somebody. He's like, "Oh, you're funny." I'm like, cool. That's
Thanks.
Good. Right? It's comedy, right?
Yep. This deadpan comedy is working. You have a pocket that you do so well. And I was always wondering if that was a choice or if that was just kind of an offshoot of something that you knew that people were responding to.
Again, I think it's probably where I just feel safe. I don't feel very safe in the broad area, in the bigness and But
then Dill Scallion, is that am I saying that right?
Scallion.
Dill Scallion?
Yeah, like the onions. Yeah.
Did you audition for that? Because that also feels like a collision of two worlds with music and this film coming together. And was this before or after that couple year gap that you're talking about?
That was Dill came along right after Mafia, I believe. And I'm still friends with him today, Jordan Brady. That was his brainchild. And so I went in and met him, and we had like a little meeting. He told me like what the idea was. There was a full script, but it wasn't, it wasn't completely, it was still in its white pages, as we say.
Yes. Okay. It was in its infancy. Yes. It needed, some love.
But he told me he had this great idea, he's like, and he was not trying to disguise it at all. He's like, it's like Spinal Tap, but it's country music. Like, okay. And so we just started playing around with some stuff, I don't think I ever really read any scenes. I think that we just like started, he had like these goofy ass lyrics to the songs. And I just kind of said, well, let me go home and sit with that for a second. And so I kind of put some music to these, these goofy ass lyrics. And then I think at that point we did read a couple of the scripted scenes. And he's like, again, he looks at me, he's like, you get it. I'm like, I do. And he's like, yeah, you get it. He's like, we're leaving in like 2 weeks. You want to go? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And that was the most fun I've ever had doing anything.
You guys toured around basically the whole time.
On a tour bus in LA and made the movie on and off the bus as we went, completely unplanned, just stopped at random places and shot on the bus, did some of the scripted stuff as much as we could along the way, and went all the way to Nashville and shot a lot of the movie there. And then did I think it was 2-3 days in LA afterwards when we got back. And that was the entire shoot. And it was glorious.
Because I just love how early work ends up landing later work. And that's the thread that I always, when I'm talking to other actors and stuff, it's like, whatever you do at the beginning, it's the work that keeps you working. And I love that this movie still kind of revisits you at different stages of your career. That people loved it.
So much so that, you know what I'm doing tomorrow? I'm doing one of these interviews with the dude who's doing a story on the anniversary of Dill Scallion.
Seriously?
Yeah.
It's never going to leave. It's like, I love it though. I mean,
because Jordan and I have been talking about doing a 20 years later sequel type of situation. So
with you and Lauren Graham, I think people would be really interested in seeing that. Would you bring back Lauren too?
Yeah, of course. And there was so many, that cast was amazing. David Koechner, Henry Winkler. It went on forever. It was like,
that's where you met Peter. Was that, because that was before you did Wonderland with him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to jump back to when you said a couple year lull later. Is this prior to Mafia, or is this couple year lull post?
This is before Mafia, I think, is where it got a little sparse in there.
And what do you do during this sparse time? Because I love that both of these auditions still feel like I didn't know what I was doing, so I just kind of threw it down.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know if that's really. Look, I've always had more confidence in myself than I should. I think that I came to town and I came to everything. I came to the stage in Seattle when we'd do gigs and just kind of, for some reason, find fearlessness, But when it came to this, like I said, I knew what I could do well and I knew what I thought was good. And so I kind of, I was a bit big shotty in my own mind,
I don't think big shotty, confident in what you could do.
Well, I just, I always had that attitude, like after Mafia, like, okay, I did a studio picture and then, the auditions would come in. I'm like, what are you talking about audition? Fuck you. What do they need to see? They haven't seen Mafia.
This isn't an offer. When do I start?
Yeah. And that's, I guess I've sort of thought about it all the way along like that. I've always been like, I've always resisted the idea of the audition process because I think it's horrible and flawed. And
I agree. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a completely different muscle too. It's like, if you think about it from a political standpoint, what gets you elected is not what you're going to do when you're governing, right? What gets you the job 90% of the time, or at least in my experience, isn't actually what I do on the day, right? It's such a different beast and muscle. And I know when we were on set talking this, and I remember you saying like, I hate auditioning. I was like, and yet you've never really stopped working. And I find that interesting. So after Mafia, when you're like, no, it's kind of like an offer, are you pushing your agents and your team to be like, get me an offer? Are you actually still auditioning?
Both.
Okay.
Because they're being realistic and I'm being me, Okay,
then there's a couple ones I want to ask about if it was an audition. And if it wasn't, how did you secure it? Because this is what's so great. So when you come on the scene for me is Fracture. And I know you were working a lot before that, where you would do a movie, you would do a little bit of television, you do a movie, a little bit of television, but you weren't actually a series regular yet on television. And there were some good movies. There was like 2 movies that grossed a shit ton of money for you that were box office before Fracture. But did you have to audition for Fracture?
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to know that process, because I feel like that's not the process where you could lean back on. I feel, with Anthony Hopkins, I'm real curious how that came to be.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays, I'm not even sure they would hold auditions for that role. I feel like they just, go out to one of their friends and offer it to them, right?
That name, right? Remember that name?
Yeah. That guy. The guy that the director's done 4 movies with already. Mm-hmm. So, I remember getting that. And that was one of those ones where it's like, well, of course I'm going to have to read for this. That's, it's Hopkins and, a young Gosling.
Yes, a very young. I didn't even mention him because I feel like at that time it was like, I mean, it was. He was just as lucky as you to land that part. You guys are both working, but no. Yeah.
And when I met him and when we started working together, I remember like, he's a lot younger than me, but I do remember going like, I mean, I knew who he was, but I do remember going like, he fucking reminds me of me when I was his age, but he's got more fucking success right now. And I'm like, I wonder how that's going to turn out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here we go.
And here we are, Barbie.
Yeah.
We landed Barbie.
But yes, I did have to read for that. And Greg Hoblet, the director of that, was just lovely from the get-go. I don't think, they didn't put me through the ringer or anything like that. I think I went and read once and they were like, yeah, that's great. Let's do this,
I love that this
At that point
happens.
in time, so that's a cop, right? At that point in time, between that and, my first gigs, Bad Boyfriend with the Gun gigs, I had been like, at that point, I feel like I'd played both sides of the law, like constantly. Like I'm either a cop or I'm the criminal. That's
Yes. You had the whole resume to build that. So
Oh.
I don't know if you're going to indulge me in this or if you remember, or hey, you pick any audition you want. How did you prepare? Like if you said you already were playing the law and the cop constantly, is it something that is so naturally in you? Or at that point, did you have a process in which you attempted to do in the audition, tangible process? Because now what everybody's hearing constantly is you also get told in the room that you get the job, which very rarely happens. Or if it does happen,
I think it's happened to me more than anybody else I know, but it doesn't happen like that all the time. It just has happened before. Yeah. As everybody else knows, it usually doesn't. So the question is about process or lack thereof.
Process or even lack of. Like some people, I think some of the best roles, you read it and you're like, I know exactly. This is already here. I don't have to do a lot, right? I'm just going to get off book. I know what to do. I need to arc it. But I'm just curious, other than reading it, if there is a process that at that point you were adhering to in order to go in and, you want that Hopkins film.
Sure. You want that. Absolutely. Yeah. But that, because I don't have any training or even what I would call skills, I guess, to fall back on, I just sort of continued and still to this day continue to sort of work on instinct and on what's on the page. Because if it's good, you shouldn't have to do a whole lot more than what's already there. So I don't spend a lot of time like thinking about getting from A to Z in a scene or I as a matter of fact, I hate planning stuff. I don't even like to know the words that well. I just kind of want to see what we can do, get the essence. If there's specificities in there, like with comedy, like with Mafia and that kind of choppy comedy like that.
The music.
Yeah, there's beats that you have to hit, and there's kind of stuff that you do have to plan a little bit for, but most of the stuff, if it's good, it's gonna feel unplanned, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's more behavioral, right? Versus lines, versus being here. And since you did play both sides of that so well, the behaviors, and they very rarely change of the cop or the other guy on the bad side of the law in any of these television shows or any of these movies. Although Fracture was like a really nice twist, like that setup was just great. It's great writing. So from Fracture, do you just get Feast of Love? Did I read that correctly? That the director of Feast of Love saw Fracture, or is that wiki madness too, like internet sensationalized?
I actually don't remember Feast of Love. I remember the connection between Fracture and a movie I did with Diane Lane because it was
Unbreakable. Is that what that one was?
Not Unbreakable, but something like that.
I'm gonna look.
On something.
It was definitely.
Is that right?
Say it again. Yes, Untraceable. That's what it was.
That was the same director as Fracture, and he just invited me back for that one, so that was good. Feast of Love, I don't remember. I may or may not have read for that. I don't remember.
I had read somewhere that somebody saw you in Fracture, and it was the same it was the director of Feast of Love that was like, oh gosh, I need him. Yeah, Robert Benton was like, I need him in this movie. Or at least that's what was written. I was like, oh, interesting.
Now that you say that, I sort of remember being on set like the first couple of days and him saying something like that to me. And of course, that's super flattering and everything, and you kind of don't know what to say about it. And then I'm just like, okay.
Well,
cool.
the work speaks for itself at a certain point. I think that's the thing that, Bill Esper always says, it's like 10 years to start working as an actor, 20 years to make an actor, like to actually have a career. And it kind of flows in line. Yours kind of jumps a little bit where it's like maybe 15 years. But at the 2007, 2008 mark, I feel like this is when we tip over to now you're having meetings and maybe not necessarily auditions. So I'm going to walk into Twilight. That's going to be like
it's cyclical, as you know.
Yes.
I mean, because the past 10 years in this business, 10, 15, I don't have to tell you or anybody out there how drastically it's changed. And although I don't have a lot of processes for myself, the processes for this business are fucking absurd. They're just, it goes from this to that. And now we do it this way. And now this is the norm. And it's, it's a little nauseating.
It is a little nauseating. Well, and I also, let's speak on that a little bit. I want to get to Twilight because if not, people will kick my ass for not asking this. But I want you, and you told it to me before, so it feels redundant, but I want to hear, because didn't Catherine see Dill Scallion? Didn't she see that and was like,
Apparently she did. Yes, because I think when I went in to meet her for the first time, I think she did mention Dill, and I said, "How did you see that?" Because it was so underground and such a culty little film. She's like, and she was very, complimentary about it and stuff. Mm-hmm. And at which point I was like, I think I went in, and I don't know what version of this I told you, but as I remember it right now, I went in with that, that sort of big shotness of like, this is just a meeting, right? I'm not gonna read for this shit, right? But Catherine and I started talking, and we were getting along, and she's just lovely, and just so like enthusiastic and passionate about stuff. And she's like, do you want to like read some scenes? And I was like, all right.
And at this point, had you read the books or read the script? Like, you were busy. Fuck. You were busy.
No, I still haven't read the book. No.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're cold reading at this point.
Yeah. So that question came afterwards. We read a couple of scenes, and it's I don't remember what scenes they are, but it's it's Bella and Charlie and whatever the scene is. We get done with that, and here again, I don't learn. They don't tell me in the room, but Catherine says she's like, do you even know what this movie is based on? I'm like, not a fucking clue. No, and she goes, go home and Google Twilight. I'm like, all right. And that was it. She's like, go home and Google Twilight. I'll see you later. Go home. I do Google Twilight. I see, it's all the stuff comes up because the books were massive at that point. I'm like, okay. So I go, this is a little indie film, but this is kind of a big deal. And I think it was the next day. Yeah, I think they let it hang there for a bit. It may not be the next day or later that night where, my agents called and said, they want to hire you for this. And I'm like, good, that's good, right? And they're like, yes, it's good.
I can only hear them right now. Yes, this is going to go well. And at this point, did they contract you for all 3 movies if they are to do, or all the movies?
There's a clause in there somewhere, that says something, but you don't, I believe for the first movie, they didn't, they don't tie you down to anything. They don't tie you down to, a price or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Everybody renegotiated after the first one.
I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. So I have 2 specific questions that I think will be really helpful for people that have been in this industry for a long time. And it's interesting because you and I had this experience. There is a difference, and I just had this last week. There's a difference when you audition for something and the director chooses you, they know what they're buying, versus getting an offer and that first day on set is kind of like an audition, right? You're kind of like, this is what I'm thinking about the character. Hopefully you've had some conversations with the director. Mm-hmm. A couple of the first films I did, the number one was an offer, and the directors, there was some clashing that happened on that first day. Everybody's like kind of trying to figure it out. So I'm curious your approach when you get offered stuff and how that first day goes for you. Or what is your preparation for that first day where you're kind of giving your idea of what you want to do with it versus maybe with the whole, just your process with that. I know it's probably different for everything, even television and film. It's a little bit different. But I just did a show last week where I was offered it, and halfway through the show, and it's a procedural, and it is a heavy procedural. And halfway through, they're like, we were thinking comedy for this character. And I was like, oh, sure. Let me just give me 1 second. Nowhere near does the writing lend itself to that, nor does the show. But sure, absolutely. Let me take 5 and give you a totally different option of what you were thinking, but it wasn't discussed beforehand. So I'm just curious.
So they offer you the role based on your comedic ability, unbeknownst to you.
Unbeknownst to me, yes. It was not shared that like, hey, we think you'd be great for this because of X, Y, and Z. It was just like, hey, do you want to do an episode of this? Yes, absolutely. Love to come play. Sure.
But it reads to you as a procedural straight up and not a comedy at all.
It is a procedural straight up. Yeah.
Oh.
Even like even if you watch the show, I don't want to say it on mic, but if I tell you the show, you're going to be like, oh yeah, totally procedural. Yes, there might be some offhanded, nice banter between some of the series regulars, right? But it's never really directed at the guest stars that are coming in with. Yeah. So, right. And it just wasn't written that way. And it just was one of those things where you're like, yes, oh, okay, we just saw it differently. No problem. But I've seen first days also not go like that. And then the writer or the director and the actor aren't talking to each other anymore, or they have to find a way to merge their ideas. Now, I've told you I'm getting ready to go do this film. I have had conversations ad nauseum with the director. So we are on the same page on that first day, right? So I just wanted to know your process, especially because you are so great at. I loved being on set with you because I know you know exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it, and you're not going to do really much else besides that. In a good way, and I mean that in an ownership way. And I think that's either a God-given gift that you just have as Billy, or that's something that's been learned along the way that I think could give some wisdom to people that have been working 15, 20 years, even myself, where I'm like, oh, that was interesting how he handled that or how he saw that differently. So I was just curious.
Okay. So I consider it part of my job, one of the bigger parts of my job, to come in with something. Don't come in with that attitude of like, I wonder what they want. I wonder how they want me to play this. I wonder what the director is going to tell me to do. I mean, that to me seems absolutely preposterous. Why would anybody do that? So depending on what the gig is and what the nature of the role is, that's, I guess, how I think about it, regardless of if I'm number 1 on the call sheet or number 104 on the call sheet. I come in, I'm like, and if it were, I think this is based on whether or not it was offered to me, right?
Yes.
If it were offered to me, that's the way I look at it. I'm like, well, they hired me for a reason. I don't really have to know what that reason is, but here's what they're getting. Mm-hmm. This is what they're going to get. And if they want something else, they hired the wrong guy. That's just always the way I look at it, Now, on the rare occasion you get, a brilliant director who takes what you're coming in with and says, awesome, that's great. What if this? They have another idea that tweaks it a little bit. That's fucking great.
Yeah.
That's really the only kind of direction I want ever. Because if you're coming in just to say stuff and try to tell me to amp it up here, amp it up, that's not direction to me. That's, you come in with an idea, give me some food, and I'll play all day long with that. Yes. Otherwise, what you're seeing is what you're getting. Yeah.
Have you been fired? Because everybody's been fired once. Have you been fired? I couldn't find anything.
No.
So then this process, that's why I wanted to ask.
Before we started talking today, I've never missed a day of work. Mm-hmm. I've never. I try to take the job itself extremely seriously, but I don't take the craft very seriously, or and certainly not the business very seriously. That's just not in my nature. I don't understand how people can take this business as seriously as they do.
No, you can't. Because look how many mountaintops you've had. And look, you've never stopped working. And I'm looking at your resume right now. Let's go back to the point that you made, like, it goes in cycles where you're auditioning sometimes and then sometimes you're not. Have you found yourself in the last decade back to auditioning? And if so, was it for television? And are you going straight to test?
So the answer is yes, with nothing but disdain. And, I mean, to be, again, but in the beginning, I was sort of thumbing my nose at being asked to read. So you can imagine what it's like fucking 25, 30 years later. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. What? Uh-huh. They want to see what? Tell them to go back and watch fucking whatever it is,
Yes.
It just doesn't compute with me. So, but like we were talking about before, this business has, it keeps evolving, and some of the evolution has not been for the better. Some of these processes just don't, they continue to not make sense. Made, for instance.
That's what I was wondering.
We made during COVID. So the period leading up to COVID and COVID itself was real slow for me. Like there's just nothing out there. And so they said, well, there's this Netflix thing, but they want you to put yourself on tape. I was like, and the material was very limited, there just wasn't a lot to do, which is, I don't have to tell you, you get like sparse little pieces of material and you're like, what the fuck do you want me to do with this? Mm-hmm. What are you going to see from this? Right? Do you want to know that I can speak? Is that what it is?
That I still know that I can see, that I still know how to memorize. Yeah.
So that was during just that uptick of self-taping. That's when that all started to come along. And so I looked at that and I'm like, well, how am I going to do anything compelling with this? And so you take your fucking iPhone and you don't just fucking set up a tripod and stand in front of a wall and say stuff. Don't do that, people out there. That's not going to be intriguing for anybody to watch. Nope. So I figured, like, as long as I have the ability, I'm going to make a little movie. I'll make this scene into a little movie. Not with edits or anything like that. It'll all be one take, but it'll be somehow cinematic. And so that's what I did for Made. I shot a scene in my kitchen. And
did you fill the scene with action? So were you cooking? Were you doing something since it was such a sparse scene, or what did you do to fill it?
Yeah, there was activity taking place. And I think what I did, and I do this, I've done this a couple of times before during that period when, you just had to self-tape for stuff. I think I did a couple of other self-tapes. If there happened to be, dual dialogue, I would kind of, because I don't want to bother anybody to bring them in to read with me and shit like that. I just don't. So I would just make it a monologue. I would just take out the other lines and I would just and I would just kind of do the scene and let the spaces be the spaces. And, so that's the one I sent in for Made. And I remember hearing from the casting director, she said, you should like teach a class on how to do this, on how to do these tapes. And of course I have no interest in doing that, but that was kind of a great compliment. It was like, oh, so taking, doing something unconventional and taking a risk, that pays off sometimes. That's good.
Yeah, when it's in the context of the story still, and how can you make this interesting where you're not nobody's going to be working up against a white wall and standing dead center in the middle of a frame. Nobody stands dead center in the middle of the frame. There's going to be action, and if you can't.
If you're going to go through this audition process, you might as well get as close as you can to what you might be doing when you actually do the show, because otherwise it's an exercise in fucking death. You're just like, I just feel like you're killing yourself and you're killing the eyeballs that are watching this bullshit.
Yeah. Well, they're watching, 50 tapes, 100 tapes.
Yeah.
And then you see something different, but not for the sake of being different, for the sake of making it more alive, more interesting and compelling to watch.
Yeah. I actually think that, I mean, for whoever listens to this, I think it's the self-taping thing that is kind of mandatory now. There's nobody really.
That's exactly what we're doing.
I think it's one of the biggest blessings you can have in this. You get to take control of, and you get to get rid of all the nervousness that you might have going into a room and standing in front of the people. You get to throw all that out the window, and you just get to do what you do. So take advantage of it. I would.
I mean, I love it. That's what I do. And I love actually taping other people. That's my joy, when I'm like, oh, what can we do with this? This can be fun. Yeah. And also, if you're not on set every single day, this is the job that you are now doing until you get selected. Okay, I'm just going to do some fun rapid fire because now I'm just curious. Have you had a bad audition?
Have I had a bad audition? Oh,
yes.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I just don't feel like I can ever imagine a world where you bomb and or care. I wanted to see if you even remembered one.
Well, I don't remember like specific ones, but I remember walking out of rooms. I remember going in because during the Mafia Dill Scallion days, I would still have to go in and read for some comedy stuff. And, you go into a room, you do comedy, and when that doesn't work, it is like getting your genitals cut off. It's awful. So I remember having a couple of those where I walk out there and I'm like, yeah. But I would still say to myself, like, they just don't get me.
Okay. What's the one role that got away? And I know that's like, what's meant is for you is whatever, but I'm so curious for you specifically, somebody that really doesn't attach themselves to the business. Is there one role that has gotten away from you that you wish would have gone in your direction?
Here's how it usually goes. I pass on more stuff than I take. I mean, and by that I mean I'll if they want me to read for it, I'll pass on the audition too. Sometimes just for the sake of like, no, I'm not going to read for that, which is, I know it sounds cocky and bullshitty, but you got to stay true to yourself. So there were ones I'm usually right in my mind. Like if I say, no, that's going to be a piece of shit, I'm usually right. Mm-hmm. I don't remember anything that I passed on that I looked at and went like, I should have done that. I do remember when they sent me the script for Walking Dead, and it was Frank Darabont. Yes. And I was like,
for Andrew Lincoln's role, which role? Yeah. Wait, did you pass? You didn't pass on this. Did you audition?
I said, I'm not going to go in to fucking read for this. It's about zombies. I hate this. This is stupid. I go, this is not what I fucking do. And yeah, it was one of the times where my agents were like, and they, how your agents will do this. They won't say anything to them yet. They're going to try to massage you a little bit and kind of go like, yeah, okay, but it's Frank Darabont. I'm like, yeah, he's great. This is a show about zombies. That's
so many people did pass on it. That's exactly what they said too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the recent one that stands out the most. Now, do I regret it? No, because look, probably my best friend in the world has become a massive success from that show. And it's great for him. It's fantastic for him. It's not for me.
It's not for you. Favorite role you've ever done?
Well, as I said before, the most fun I've ever had doing a movie was Dill Scallion. Now, if I go back and look at that today, there's so many things that I would do differently with it. So I'm not going to say that was that was potentially one of my favorites.
That
There
would be your favorite project, I think, for sure. Because that was what I was going to ask you next. Because I think it can be separate, right? Where the project can be what it is, but then there's a role that gets you.
Now let's keep in mind, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I only really like and or respect about 5% of what I've ever done. Most of it I don't like because
Why so?
a lot of television and movies that aren't made well, they just don't work for me. And I watch them and I just go, it's fucking bullshitty. I don't like it. Once in a while, there's a thing that comes along. So early on, and I think I had done 13 pilots before one got picked up and went to air. And that was Pete Berg's show, Wonderland, which I think you could still put on television today and it would hold up. It was a really, really good show. I mean, for network television, especially, it's what we do on cable now.
Yes.
That he was trying to do on network television back then. And it got canceled because I don't know, whatever, people weren't ready for it. But that show and that role, had that role continued, that probably would have been one of my favorites. I played a psychiatrist at Bellevue Hospital in New York, and it was just a great premise. And it's, we never explore the world of mental health and the psychiatric community and stuff like that, which I think is another reason that the show got canceled.
But that also spawned from your favorite project because Pete was on Dill Scallion. So it's like that. Yeah. That's the thing I think.
So Dill Scallion spawned a lot of shit. Yeah,
it really did. And I think that people are always like, oh, I got to get to this mountaintop or this mountaintop. It's like, if you just focus on the work you're doing presently, it will take you the work will take you to planting the seeds, right? For a career versus a job. And just being like, I got this job. No, okay, well, then focus on that job because who knows who's going to see it, what's going to happen, what's going to spawn from there.
And my manager, who I've had for, I guess, almost 30 years now. Wow. She would always champion that notion, the notion of, I know this may not be your favorite gig, but this and this and this might come back, And I would say like, yeah, okay. You do something and eventually everything's going to come back. All right, I understand. But she was very mindful of that in the greatest way, where I would just sort of like, I would go like, yeah, I don't care. This right now is bad.
But I mean, hey, it's great to have somebody that gets you and knows how to help you. I mean, look, 30 years later. Okay, so 30 years later, tell me why Fire Country, why you say yes. And I also then want to know about Morning Rock, and then I'll let you go.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, my ex-wife says she wants to apply my daughter to this school in New York. I go, okay, I don't want to live in a different city as my daughter. So if we're going to do that, I'll move to New York too. So I moved to New York, getting an apartment down on the Lower East Side. And it's, this is just pre-COVID, thick of COVID, moved to New York, like just as COVID's kind of a little bit on the downslide, but not really yet. Anyway, it's slow as fuck, nothing's going on. And, I get sent like another couple of these things where it's like, can you put yourself on tape for this? Can you put yourself on tape for that? And so, I throw a couple of things out there, nothing I'm that excited about. And then, I don't know, at some point in time, they call me. They didn't send me the script. They said, there's this project at CBS. They're really interested in you for it. We're going to send it to you. Take a look. And they sent me the pilot of Fire Country. And, I'd known Max's work for a long. I didn't know Max, but I'd known his work for a long time. And I look at the idea as a whole, like what it can be. I don't Rarely do I go into something thinking about just what my participation in it is going to be. I want to know what it is on the whole. This looked like a solid project. It looked like they had what they wanted to be sort of defined in the pilot. It wasn't all procedural. It was a family drama. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I know what to do with this, And when I know what to do with it, it's kind of an easy answer most of the time. It's like, why wouldn't I? Of course.
Yes. Yeah. Fits on you.
Yeah.
So that was an agreement. Yeah. I mean, thank God you did.
The New York part of it came in because I moved all the way fucking across the country. Now I'm in Vancouver where we shoot the show on the other side of the coast again. And it was just, as it always happens in this, if you want to, if you're not getting gigs and stuff like that, make a plan to go on vacation. You're going to get a gig at that time.
Uh-huh. Please leave. Please don't want to care to be anywhere near where a project might be. And then wait, hold on, come back. Morning Rock. So Revelation, you meet Jeff Wolf. And I know, like you just said, you work for a while, like your manager says, you never know who's going to do what or who's going to do this or that. And you look at projects as a whole and you elevate it, the idea, to a different realm.
I'll try to be brief about this as well, but it might.
You don't have to be brief. I'm here.
For those who care, in the category of nothing is ever going to turn out like you think it is, ever. Revolution, NBC show. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm, probably half lit at a poker table somewhere. Get a call from my manager who said, you got to get back here right now. Jon Favreau and J.J. Abrams want to sit down with you. And I'm like, all right. So
had you auditioned or anything? This was just.
Oh, this was right on the heels of the Twilight movies.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was. Clarification. Mm-hmm.
So I go and sit down with JJ and Jon Abrams, and they start pitching me this show. Like, it was fucking surreal. I was like, because that kind of thing wasn't happening that much. But they were pitching me this show and what this character is. Now, they're pitching me the show that whoever remembers Revolution from television, that David Lyons ends up playing. But it was offered to me. We get down to Atlanta. We do day one of shooting, and I'm playing that role. And all the while, they still haven't found the lead. They still haven't found the Miles guy. So we shoot day one, get done with that day. I get a call from the agents. They're like, just sit tight for a second. We're working on something, blah, 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 blah. Eric Kripke, our showrunner and creator, calls me later on. He goes, I think you'll find this good news. He's like, we want you to play Miles. I'm like, yeah, I think that's right.
That's how that went down.
That's how that went down. So so they switched me over to that role and gave David Lyons, who's fucking awesome.
Dave. Come do this shortly.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how shit happens sometimes. And on that show, my trainer and our stunt coordinator was Jeff Wolf, who directed Morning Rock, starring you. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm curious, when you got Morning Rock, or any part of the process, is how you approach things. Yeah. What was your impetus for saying yes to something like this? I
didn't want to do it if it were just, and I think you and I talked about this. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to do it if it were just going to be a straight up, there's creatures coming after you thing. Mm-hmm. Unless I can find something that for me is more compelling about the story itself, then I don't want to do it. And so
you said no to zombies. So if you said no to zombies to Frank, I need to know.
And I never looked at this as a zombie picture. And I told Wolf that from the beginning. He sent me a first draft. I mean, he had been working on ideas and trying to get funding for a couple of different things. This is the one that kind of got its funding first. And, we've always just wanted to, do this together. So one of the biggest reasons for me to even like get involved from the get-go before it's a go picture is he's my friend and I want to do a picture with him. So sends me the first draft, and the first draft to me is I'm just like, dude.
Well, it's white pages. We can do more with it. White pages.
I'm like, let's toss this back and forth. So I did a brush through, sent it back to him. He'd do a couple of things. We tossed it back and forth for a few weeks, and got to the place where it was like, okay, we can kind of make this make sense. I said, now, I don't want to hear the fucking word zombie. When we're making this movie, it's not fucking zombies. Whatever you want to call them, I don't care. Just, I don't want to hear it. Okay. Because I have a thing about
well, now I know with The Walking Dead that you have a thing, and not to give anything away, ours, there's an element of, what can we say? How do we say this? That doesn't grief. I'm going to go from that place. I'm going to go from that place. It's a place.
There's bad guys in the movie that represent that grief.
Yes. Everybody deals with their grief differently. And I actually see that there's different representations of how people handle their grief in this picture. And that's what I found compelling and interesting, is like what happens in your mind when you're going through the stages of grief.
Yeah.
And how distorted and how intense grief can be on your psyche, on your visions, on what you see, do, feel, hear.
Yeah. And see, you came in thinking about it that way, which was fucking great, because already then we're in the same movie. That could have gone way differently.
Mm-hmm.
They hire somebody else and that person's coming in to make a fucking Scream feature, and that's not good.
It's not going to work. Yeah. It's not going to work. Well, that's just not where I want to work. It doesn't give me a place to work from. And like you said, and I don't think I've ever, you thinking about the picture as a whole. And I like that are you writing more?
I'm always writing. Whether or not I'm writing scripts yes, I am, but I'm not very diligent about it. I should be more, because I've got a couple of things that could be really good, but it's hard to do that.
You're working all the time. Yes, you can't. Yeah.
I mean, I'm working, 14, 15-hour days every fucking day. So
yes. But when something like this comes along, where it's something that you want to work on, I love that your brain, after working in storytelling and being a writer for so long, can massage together a full idea. Right. And I'm really curious how people are going to interpret it, if they'll feel the depth of what we intended. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen a final cut yet. I've only basically seen sort of a temp assemblage without music and without the final effects and all that kind of stuff done. I'm very curious to see it myself. I
know how you feel about compliments, but it's really,
how do I feel about compliments?
I'm going to give it to you and see how you feel. It's really a joy to step on a set with somebody who, honestly, regardless of whether or not why you decided to take the project, how you handle a set, how you work within the story, and how you really turn it on. When that camera is rolling, Billy, there's nothing like you do. Your instincts lead you to places that are always, I think, so surprising, endearing, completely inhabited. And that's why I think you continue to work and work and work and work. And why in certain projects and stuff, I remember when I saw Fracture, to me, that was the standout role. You're expecting certain things from Anthony Hopkins, right? So there's certain things, Revelation, it's interesting that could have been a quote unquote firing moment, but it wasn't. The fact that they're like, no, we love this guy. We're just going to slide him over here and make it work better. And I think a lot of people train to have that. And then other people, you got the Jennifer Lawrences of the world, and you got you where you're like, no, I don't mess with my instincts or what's going on. And it's really refreshing and dangerously exciting to be on the opposite end of that. And I think it evokes some of the most interesting storytelling. So
that was, first of all, one of the most well thought out, complete compliments I've ever had. Thank you.
Well, when I get to study your work for a week, I'm like, damn, man. Wow. Well, especially after working with you, I was like, wow, okay, I need to know what he's doing. But sometimes that can't be taught, right? It can almost be taught out of you.
It most definitely can. You get people talk about habits a lot. And, you get on a long running television show, for instance, and there is a danger of falling into some habits.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you're touching on this.
And I'm very aware of it, and I don't know if me being so aware of it makes me feel like I'm falling into habits more, or if it's hopefully keeping me from doing that. I have no idea. But again, you're working with this. It's what's on the page. That's all you have to work with. So it can be limiting, and it's a danger, which is why, you go and do a movie like Morning Rock, because we had done the first season of Fire Country, and I was like, we did 22 episodes, and I was like, I need something else to throw me off here a little bit. You know what I mean? And so before we get away from it, not only do I appreciate all those words that you said, a lot of those big words I didn't even understand, but I told you this on set too. And I think I said these were, I'm so glad they got you for this, because that's a tricky fucking role.
So tricky.
Really tricky fucking role. And man, roles reversed. If I were to be confronted with your role, the male version of your role, not a fucking chance I'd have the ideas that you had, which were so fucking so in the pocket. And that's what there doesn't need to be a whole lot of trial and error. If you know what you're doing, you know what you're aiming for. And you can do 50 takes of let's try this, let's try that. You know what's right when it's right. And you came in with the fucking, the honed in right idea. So that was great.
Thank you. That was very nice, Billy. Thank you, Billy. No, I'm glad. I'm excited to see how it comes together. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I always like to say where everybody can find you. I don't think you're on any socials, and they can find you on television.
The whole thing, the whole social media thing, I get it for people. It makes me a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I get it. I wouldn't think that you would. That's why I already even made the assumption. I didn't even go looking. I was like, he's not going to have this. Are you still playing music?
I mean, the only time I was out jamming in the world was back in the Seattle days when we were doing that literally. But I haven't played live for 25 years. But this show gives me an opportunity once in a while I wrote a song for the show last season. We're doing another one in an episode this season. We just got out of the studio recording that. So yeah,
I writing. I remember.
And then I still have this bevy of sort of country-esque Americana type songs that I've written over the past few years that I'm planning on doing something with.
Dill Scallion 2, right? Great.
Dill Scallion 2 is being talked about.
I mean, we could just take some of that music, right, and just merge them onto an album, and then you could do a tour. I'm just going to say it now. So let's see what happens.
Find us the financing for that, and then
be right back.
And then we're going to put you in Dill Scallion too.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Cool.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Thanks for having it. It was fun.